É que este aqui, tipo da CBS, tem as provas em display. Este aqui só tem duas câmaras. Tem tipo uma câmara para a audiência e uma câmara para... Mano, isto deve ser bué desgastante. Tipo, imaginem, 9 dias, puto. 9 dias nisto, bro. Alguém pode fazer um resumo de 10 segundos sobre o que é isto? Isto o que é, Miguel? Isto é tipo o julgamento do Johnny Depp com a Amber Heard, basicamente, o processo de difamação. Porquê está a ser tanto tempo? Mano, porque isto é um processo bué longo, bro. Mas tipo, já viram o que é que isto é para uma pessoa? E Johnny Depp disse que não há abuso mútuo, só apenas abuso por parte da Amber Heard e que ela tem alguns problemas e que se automutila. Mas isso é a psicóloga da Amber Heard e do Johnny Depp ou é a psicóloga que o Estado contratou para este serviço? Dr. Shannon Curry, Forensic Psychologist. Puto, eu acho que é uma pessoa que veio aqui falar, não é? Tipo a psicóloga dele.
Boas noites, maltinha.
Como é que é, Bruno? Obrigado pelos 9 meses, meu. Obrigadíssimo. Mano, é a Gold Digger. É a Gold Digger. Mano, a juíza está-se a rir bastante para a equipa legal do Depp. Mas estes aqui não estão com... Estes aqui não estão com muito coisa. Bro, e já viram o gajo, o advogado da Amber Heard, a basicamente... Mano, esperem lá. O gajo a dar object à própria pergunta que fez. Isto é do melhor. Isto foi ontem.
Dr. Kipper told me he'd sustained an injury on one of his fingers.
Objection, hearsay.
Wait, you asked the question.
Okay, you said it sustained an injury.
O Johnny a
You
rir-se
know
bué,
what caused
puto.
damage to Mr. Oh,
Next question.
okay, you said hearsay.
Wait, you asked the question.
Cagando nabo. Isto é tão bom, meu, a sério. Agora já sei porque é que os megaprocessos que temos aqui em Portugal nem chegam à fase de instrução. Pá, pois, mano, é. É complicado. Eu mandei um vídeo de momentos fun disso, by the way. Eu já vi isso, Fire, já vi. Eu tenho visto esse. Os civis que estão a acompanhar todo o caso para determinar se é culpado ou não, eles não têm contacto com o exterior. Nem redes, nem nada. Ah, os gajos, tipo, os gajos do júri. Sim, eu acho que é mandatório que eles não tenham contacto com o exterior, sim. Eles não podem ser influenciados, basicamente. Por redes sociais e afins. Mas foda-se, mano, 9 dias sem tocar em redes sociais. Mas como é que eles podem ter a certeza que eles não veem nada, bro? É bué da estranho. Aí agora vão ficar aqui meia hora a discutir merdas, bro. Eles têm um sítio para ficar lá. Ah, eles ficam ali dentro do tribunal. Uau! Não, tipo, imaginem, o processo legal nos Estados Unidos é um bocado estranho, malta. Não sei, André, não faço ideia, bro, não sei. Estás-me a dizer isso e eu tipo, não sei também. Puto, imagina, sei que o júri tem influência. Agora não sei se tipo, se tem só eles que decidem, eu acho que não. Ficam no hotel de 5 estrelas. Pago pelo Johnny. O andar de um hotel só para eles, ok, isso faz sentido. All rise. Oh não, Johnny e a Amber. Agora era um bom momento para eles se atirarem um ao outro, tipo, à porrada. Estão ali os dois sozinhos. Eles nem olham um para o outro, bro. É estranhíssimo, tipo, eles não olham mesmo um para o outro. Olha lá, estão os dois ali colados ao PC. Reatavam, e chegavam ao pé um do outro e davam um beijo na boca. E acabava-se esta história toda. E tipo, como é que chamava aquele jogo? O It Takes Two. Tipo, It Takes Two. A minha dúvida é como se tem a certeza que não mexeram em redes sociais durante o processo. Não sei, bro. A cena do dedo. O que é que não entendes da cena do dedo? Então ela mandou-lhe uma garrafa aos cornos e cortou-lhe um dedo sem querer. Pronto. Mandou-lhe uma garrafa e cortou-lhe o dedo. Pronto. Com a garrafa. Que lhe atirou. Como é que é, Chico? Pá, puto, isto agora está tenso. Sou pago para tirar ideias para o ar. Ser credível não faz parte do contrato. Ai, God. Deixa lá ver. Agora estão a dar zoom no Johnny Depp. Gosto daquela garrafa de água sem patrocínio. Mano, esta senhora é que coitada, bro. Tipo, é sempre a mesma senhora. E estes dois também são sempre os mesmos. Coitada, tem que estar ali a trabalhar. Que chatice. Nós pensamos nisto, mas a realidade é que tipo, há boa gente a fazer isto todos os dias. A Disney, os gajos da Disney não vão voltar atrás, bro. E se voltarem, o Johnny já disse que não quer fazer. É invisual. Esta senhora é invisual. Pois ela realmente não está a olhar para o PC, bro. Que estranho. Por acaso isso faz sentido, bro. Se ela for invisual, faz todo o sentido. Ela só precisa ter 2 sentidos ativos, que é a audição e o tato. Se ela estiver a escrever em braille, com um teclado daqueles que ela sente, o braille, estão a ver? Basicamente, ela só precisa ter... para já, os cegos têm tipo um sentido... têm a audição muito mais aguçada. Ok? Portanto, ela só precisa ter 2 sentidos. Isso é genial, bro. Isso é genial. Não vê, fica menos aborrecida. Não, tipo, fica só a ouvir. O que se passou com a Disney, estou a léguas. Pá, o que se passou com a Disney basicamente, tipo, despediu o Johnny Depp. Tipo, os fãs do Johnny estão a querer raptar. Aí, mano, isso é tão estúpido, bro. Isso já não ajuda em nada, mano, honestamente. Isso é estupidez. Eu acho que o Elon Musk ofereceu 24 horas de security à Amber Heard, não foi? Mano, é lógico que ela agora vai ter vai receber um hate descomunal, né? Olha, ele já está-lhe a dar informações ao ouvido. Ok? Ok? Cochichou. Não é invisual. Pois não, a senhora está a olhar para o PC. Não é nada, olha ela. Coitada da senhora, já estávamos aqui a especular bué. Ela até está de fones e tudo. Não percebo porque é que ela está ali à frente da courtroom. É bué da estranho. Nos Fantastic Beasts. Ele já não vai entrar nos Fantastic Beasts, malta. Já nem sequer é a hipótese. Até o Mads Mikkelsen já lhe deu replace. E queria perguntar se já jogaste RPG de mesa. Nunca joguei RPG de mesa, mas gostava muito, Páscoa, por acaso. Como é que é, Dark? Esse WhatsApp não funciona. Puto, funciona. Eu estou para ver a tua mensagem à boé, só que ainda não vi, mano. Desculpa, tenho que ver isso. Tenho que ver isso. Ok, já resumi o áudio. Deixa-me ver as diferenças agora. Ok. Vou tentar pôr legendas, ok?
Alright, we're ready for the jury then? Yes, sir. Okay. Alright, thank you.
Este está abaixo. Pá, isto está muito baixo, mano. Porquê que está tão baixo? Está mesmo baixinho, bro. Vai-se lá saber porquê. Pá, eu vou aumentar aqui na minha coluna, mas... Pá, sim, mas a CBS por norma até... Este está mais baixo. O que é que eles estão a fazer? Ok. Estão em pé. E este é full cam. Este vai mostrando as pessoas que lá estão. Mas tá mais um está mais baixo que o outro. Sabem que eu fui-me informar.
Alright, thank you. Your next witness?
Putz, isto está-me a pôr...
We call Officer Melissa Sines by deposition designation.
Alright.
And just so the jury is aware, for the first hour or so, what you'll hear is questioning by Ms. Heard's counsel. It will then shift to question.
Ok, deixa-me ouvir aqui, só por curiosidade.
Please state your name and your business address.
Yes, Officer Melissa, Martin Luther King Jr. Boulevard,
Ok, está mais alto aqui.
Jr. Boulevard, Los Angeles, California. Los Angeles, California.
Ok.
And what is your occupation?
I am a police officer.
Okay. And how long have you been a police officer?
Zero legendas agora.
Going on 12 years.
When
2009.
Não está a entrar as
was that with
legendas.
the LAPD?
Yes, it was.
Did you have any law enforcement experience prior to coming to the LAPD in July of 2000?
24 horas. Proteção 24 horas. Porque estão a ameaçá-lo a raptar.
2016, what was your rank?
Can you repeat the date?
May 21st, 2016. 2016?
I was a training officer.
Training officer.
And was that a P3?
Correct.
Ok.
And as a training officer,
Os fãs de Johnny.
you considered
Alguns.
a field training officer?
Correct.
And for how long a period of time had you been a training officer as of May 21, 2016?
Bro, se demoram bué de tempo a fazer perguntas um bocado.
Approximately, I believe, 4 months.
And
Oh, o normal, Miguel,
who
já se
was
sabe.
the first officer you trained once you became a training officer at the LA?
Foi há um ano? O que é que foi há um ano, poeta?
I don't recall.
When did you start training Officer Haddon?
Ah, a gravação. Pois, deve ter sido numa...
I don't recall.
Isto é uma prova qualquer.
Do you have an approximate?
If the incident was in May, then it's going to be within 2 months of May, before or after.
Ok.
So are you suggesting that you may not have started training Officer Haddon until 2 months after the May 21, 2016 incident, so he wasn't there?
No, I'm not.
Was it 2 months or less from the time you started training Officer Haddon before the May 21, 2016 incident?
Yes, so I have a probationer for 2 months. So May could have been the second month I had him or the first month I had him.
But you don't recall, as you sit here today, how long you had been training Officer Haddon as of the May 21st, 2016 incident?
Correct.
What does Central Division include?
It encompassed downtown Los Angeles.
In May of 2016, what shift were you on?
Ok.
I was working nights.
And what would the night shift entail? What was
Não.
the time from when?
É em Los Angeles. Polícia de Los Angeles.
It is approximately 6:45 p.m. to 6:45 a.m.
And how many days a week would you work the shift?
Estão-lhe a fazer estas perguntas e ela de certeza teve alguma coisa a ver com o caso. Deixem ver. Deve ter ido responder a uma cena qualquer, entre eles os dois.
That were working on your shift in May 2016 in Central Division.
I don't recall.
I mean, are we talking less than 5, more than 10, more than 25?
Por que ela está de máscara no vídeo?
There would be at least 5 units. How high over that, I wouldn't know that. Every night is different. The city pulls from different divisions if there's special events going on. So it's constantly changing.
Como é que é, Inês?
Okay. But it's usually at least 5 and maybe somewhere between 5 and 10 if there's not a special event. Would that be a fair estimate?
Yeah, nesta altura era, yeah.
Correct.
What was the process for checking out equipment in May 2016 after roll call?
Bro, what the fuck?
We
Cara,
would walk to the window and give them our name and serial number, and they would present us with equipment for the shift.
And what equipment were you given in May 2016 after roll call?
I don't recall.
Pouco aceitável, então usar máscara pode ser. Reagem com a boca de forma pouco aceitável. Como assim? Isto começou em 2016, acho eu.
I don't remember that specific day that I checked out equipment. I can tell you what I typically check out, if that's what you'd like.
All right, let's start there.
I usually check out a police vehicle, a taser, a less lethal beanbag shotgun,
Ok.
and a regular shotgun.
Uau.
Anything else?
Não.
No, nothing else.
Do you check out body-worn video equipment?
Yes, if you were trained in body-worn video, then yes, you would check that out.
Ok.
All right. Were you trained in body-worn video equipment?
I was not.
Have you ever
Sim, isto foram as merdas que levaram ao divórcio, percebem?
body-worn video equipment?
Yes, I have.
Não, já tiveram antes, Miguel. Pá, em
I don't
2019,
remember
acho
a
eu.
specific date.
What is your best estimate?
Eu não percebo porque é que estão a fazer estas perguntas
If
à
I
mulher.
had to guess, it would probably be June of 2016.
Why do you think it was June of 2016 that you first were assigned body-worn video equipment?
What? Body worn.
Because that's the time frame that I remember having to use it. It was new to me. I never used body worn before.
Ok.
When did the LAPD start issuing body-worn equipment for Central Division?
I don't know that date.
When approximately?
I don't know. I couldn't give you a date.
Pois.
Can you name any other officer that did not have body-worn equipment that was on your shift at any time between November 2015 and June 2016, other than you?
Porquê que isto é tão importante? Não estou a
I
perceber.
cannot.
Have you had more than one body-worn video equipment?
Body worn camera, is that what you're asking?
Yes.
I have had two. One in Central Division, and now a new one at Southwest Division where I currently am. The camera stays at their respective divisions.
Ok.
While you were at Central Division, did you ever get assigned more than one body-worn video camera?
Not to my knowledge.
Ela não devia estar a usar a body camera, era isso. E isto deve ser relevante de alguma forma para o caso.
Throughout the time that you were at Central Division, is that correct?
Correct.
Do you have a recollection of at any time while you were at Central Division, your body-worn video camera not working?
Objection,
so
relevance.
you couldn't turn it on during an incident?
I do not recall that.
What
Jesus
tools were
Christ,
available
shut.
to you in May of 2016 for investigating calls, answering and investigating calls?
Can you specify?
Olha os gajos, bué tipo.
Well, did you have a notebook, for example?
Yes, we carry field officers' notebooks.
A cara deles, puto.
Did you have
Do género, foda-se, mano.
Yes.
Can you describe what your field officer notebook looked like in May of 2016?
Oh meu Deus, bro. Foda-se.
It's a small just paper pad that we keep in our pockets to write on.
And do you carry a pencil or a pen with it so that you can take them out during a call?
Eles já estão a ficar bem impacientes,
I
bro.
do.
A cara do gajo a rir-se, puto.
You can turn them into the kit room and they can store them.
Is that what you have done?
Do you carry a pen?
I have my same officer's field officer's notebook in my locker.
Since you started?
No, I've had several different ones, but I usually keep them in my locker.
So, for the field officer's notebook that you had...
Mas é suposto eles verem 1h47 deste
That
vídeo.
would be in your locker?
É suposto eles ficarem 1h47 minutos a
Should be,
ver
yes.
isto.
How many field officer notebooks have you filled since you've been a police officer?
Not many, probably less than 5.
Ei, bro, foda-se, não. Não vamos ver 2 horas desta gaja a falar, não. Tipo, não vamos ver 2 horas desta polícia, desta gaja. Deixa-me só ver uma coisa, tipo. O que é que ela disse que era suposto eles fazerem na ordem de trabalhos?
And just so the jury is aware,
Ok? Espera.
Mr. Melissa signs by deposition designation, and just
Okay.
All right, thank you. Your next witness?
We call Officer Melissa Sines by deposition designation.
All right.
And just so the jury is aware, for the first hour or so, what you'll hear is questioning by Ms. Heard's counsel. It will then shift to questioning by Mr. Depp's counsel.
All right, thank you.
Ok.
Please state your name and your business address. When you answered call best as you answered calls, is that correct?
Yes.
It's deposition exhibit number 14. It's a multiple page document. I'm just asking her if she
A
recognizes.
psicóloga.
To the office.
Posso pôr a psicóloga?
Have you
É?
ever- I did not for about.
Ok, vamos pôr a
Or
psicóloga.
in forensic psychology, correct?
No, I'm a licensed clinical psychologist.
But you're not board certified.
No,
Okay. And you also have only been practicing approximately 8 years, is that correct?
that's not correct.
How many years?
I've been licensed for 10 years,
Okay.
and I've been practicing for about 15 years.
Okay. And that includes what you went through with your different trials in Hawaii and everything else that you testified to, correct?
Yes,
Okay. Now, you went to Mr. Depp's home for dinner and drinks before you were hired as an expert in this case, correct?
that's not quite right. I was interviewed at Mr. Depp's home by his legal team. Dinner was served.
You, in attendance
Bro.
with Mr. Depp was Adam Waldman, correct?
Yes,
Ben Chu, correct?
yes,
Camille Vasquez,
yes,
okay. And the
Vasquez.
dinner lasted approximately 3 to 4 hours, correct?
yes,
And it included
interview.
drinks, correct?
yes. Dinner and I believe drinks were served.
Okay. And this was before you were hired as an expert, correct?
Yes, this was an interview so that they could make an informed decision as to whether or not to retain me.
And don't you think that's a little odd that you're getting interviewed by Mr. Depp to decide whether you're going to testify adversely against Amber Heard?
I was interviewed by the legal team.
And Mr. Depp was present. It was his home, correct?
Yes,
And he was serving dinner and drinks.
he was
Correct.
not serving dinner and drinks.
Well, it was
Epá, a
at his
gaja é mesmo
house.
esta advogada é mesmo burra, meu.
Yes, it was at his house.
Okay. And you were contacted by Camille Vasquez, somebody you knew in the community, in February of 2020. Is that correct?
I knew of Ms. Vasquez professionally. We live in the same city and I work with many attorneys.
And at that time, you not only knew Johnny Depp, you'd seen a number of his TV and movie roles, and you believed he was a good actor, correct?
Not correct. I did not know Johnny Depp. I
Well,
had
you
seen
knew of
several of
him.
his movies.
You knew who he was,
Yes,
right? And you believed he was a good actor,
yes.
correct? Okay.
Bro, what the fuck? Isto é...
You provided an expert designation in this case before ever seeing Amber or having an opportunity to review any documents or records. Isn't that correct?
I did not provide an expert designation. That's an attorney thing. My opinions are contained in my report.
Let's pull up Plaintiff's Exhibit 884, please.
Portanto, a gaja está a tentar descredibilizar a psicóloga, é isso?
This was plaintiff's designation, identification of expert witnesses in this case. And this is dated February 2021. That's a year after you went to dinner at Mr. Depp's house, correct?
Yes,
Okay. And it attributes, if you
Yeah.
go to page
Possivelmente.
13, it says you have 3 opinions. The first of those is that Amber Heard, quote, exhibits patterns of behavior that are consistent with co-occurring cluster B personality disorder traits, especially borderline personality disorder. Did I get that right?
I'm reading that here. That is not my opinion.
Okay.
Well,
but
it's a current
attributed-
opinion, but this was not an opinion of mine then. I didn't have any opinions at that time.
It says Dr. Curry will testify, correct?
That's what it says, yes.
Okay, and this is a signed pleading, correct, on behalf of Mr. Depp?
I'm not sure I understand what that means.
You
What?
don't understand what a signed pleading is?
No,
Okay. Do you understand that Mr. Depp's counsel prepared this and served it on Ms. Heard's counsel?
I'm not an attorney. I don't understand necessarily all of these procedures.
Okay. Are you aware that Mr. Depp is on an audio recording years earlier taunting Amber Heard that she has a borderline personality disorder?
I was made aware of that in this case, yes.
So you heard, is that one
Actually,
of the audio
not
tapes
necessarily
you listened to?
taunting, but I do recall hearing that Mr. Depp had used that phrase.
So it's a coincidence that you now think she has those attributes after the attorneys listed it in February 2021.
Portanto, está a questionar o
And
profissionalismo da
Mr.
senhora, é
Depp
isso?
had made that accusation to Ms. Heard years earlier.
My opinions aren't based on coincidence.
It's objection, I'm
Okay.
sorry, Dr. Yes. Compound, I'll sustain the objection.
All right. It's a coincidence then that you came up with
Aquele
symptoms
gajo.
of borderline personality disorder years later after Mr. Depp has been taunting Ms. Heard in an audio tape.
I
calling her-
can't speak to whether or not there's a coincidence. What I can tell you is my opinions are based on the results of my evaluation.
And it's a coincidence that Mr. Depp's counsel attributed.
É o
that
advogado
to
do,
you, said
do Johnny, é
that
um dos
to you in
advogados
February
do Johnny Depp.
2021
É
when you looked
o,
at it.
neste caso é o advogado de
sure.
serviço, I guess.
Now, would you agree
É o gajo que está ali
that
sendo, este gajo é o gajo que objecta.
number of women
Que eu, pá, nesta situação, daquilo que eu estou a perceber, aqueles que se sentam lá atrás são aqueles que falam,
No, that's not quite right.
enquanto,
75%?
ou seja, deve ser o senior
The way you phrased it is not
representative,
quite
é uma
right.
cena
Tell
assim.
me, tell me what's right.
Okay, so there are
A perguntar
more
é a
women
advogada
who
da
have been diagnosed with bipolar
da Amber
disorder
Heard.
than men. It's more prevalent in women.
And trauma can cause borderline personality disorders, can't it?
No.
Never?
Right now, we know that there are people
Ele e
who have
ela,
borderline
eles têm todos três
personality
advogados.
who have sustained childhood trauma. There are also people who have borderline personality disorder who have had no childhood trauma. So, like most personality disorders, and really like most mental health issues in general, there seems to be both a biological component. In this case, with borderline personality disorder, the research tends to support a genetic component and possibly a neurological component. And then there is also possibly an environmental component triggering those genetic markers.
Do you know the percentage of women who are victims of IPV, intimate partner violence, or domestic abuse who are diagnosed with borderline personality disorders?
I can't tell you the percentage off at the top of my head, but I do know that there is a larger, women with borderline personality disorder tend to have a higher prevalence of being involved in intimate partner violence relationships, being the receiver of violence, and being the perpetuators of violence.
Now, you've never been asked to testify or serve as an expert with respect to whether someone has a bipolar disorder. Is that correct?
A bipolar disorder?
Yes.
That's not correct.
Okay.
Uau. Foi buscar mais coisas. Folhear, folhear, folhear. Aquilo está sempre à pinha, meu. E são sempre pessoas diferentes que estão lá a ver a cena. Para eles é como ir ao cinema. Como é que é, Tiago? Aquela senhora ali ao lado do Johnny Depp, do lado esquerdo, é a Camila Vasquez. É uma das advogadas dele. E o do lado direito é o Ben Chu, que é o advogado dele. Do lado da Amber Heard é uma gaja chamada não sei quantas, que é loira, e depois há o outro gajo que é o que estão sempre a gozar com ele. Que é o Strogard, ou lá como é que ele se chama.
Yes,
On March 21, 2022?
I believe that was the date, yes.
And were you under oath at that time?
Eu estive a investigar, inclusive fui ver quem é que era a juíza e vi que ela serviu 4 anos na Marinha.
Have you ever
Estados
been
Unidos.
asked to testify or serve as an expert with respect to whether someone has bipolar disorder? And your answer at that time, will you please read to
Okay,
the
Fabio.
jury?
I'm sorry, page 207?
207, line 5.
Ah,
Could you
No.
read? Okay, thank you. Now, okay, thank you. 7, line 5.
ah,
Could you
No.
read? Okay, thank you. Now,
What the
this
fuck,
designated
man?
That quote
No!
exhibits patterns of behavior that
Could
are
you- no.
consistent with co-occurring cluster B personality disorder traits, especially borderline personality disorder, correct?
I'm sorry, I missed the first part. What was that?
When this designation was served that you have in front of you as Plaintiff's Exhibit 884,
Oh, okay.
you had not rendered an opinion that, quote, Ms. Heard
Okay.
exhibits patterns of behavior that are consistent with co-occurring cluster B personality disorder traits, especially borderline personality disorder, correct?
No, I had not rendered any opinions. My opinions weren't finalized until after my evaluation.
Right. So when this came out, you had not rendered that opinion?
I had not rendered that opinion.
Okay. The second opinion that's listed in the February 2021 is
Não,
that
estou a ver a cena da
Ms.
já
Heard
tarde.
repeatedly and characterologically perpetuated severe physical and psychological intimate partner violence, IPV, toward Mr. Depp over the course of their relationship. End of quote. Did I read that correctly?
It says perpetrated, but other than that, yes.
Okay. And so is it correct that that this pleading says in February 2021 that you are going to testify to that?
This document, yes,
Okay?
it says that.
And you have
Bué
never
de
been
tempo,
asked
Kelly,
to
mas o dia todo
testify
quase.
as to whether anyone has
Vive, Peneta.
behaviorally or characterologically conducted conduct that suggests they may be an IPV perpetrator, correct? I have to ask that again because I
Yes.
stumbled, I can't
Thank
do
you.
characterologically. That one's just a
Okay.
tough one for me. Okay.
Yeah.
You have never been asked to testify as to whether anyone has behavioral or characterological
Faz mal, Zanami, tranquilo.
conduct
Como é que é,
that
Chica?
suggests they may have been an IPV perpetrator, correct?
No, I've never been asked to testify for that.
Okay. And that was not your opinion in February 2021, correct?
No,
And in fact, you do not hold that opinion now, and you were not even asked to provide such an analysis or opinion. Isn't that correct?
no, or that is correct, yes.
That's correct, okay. And you have never held that opinion, correct?
No, that is correct, yes.
Okay. And your third opinion, if we can go to page 14, was that Ms. Heard exhibits patterns of behavior that suggest her allegations of abuse against Mr. Depp are false, end of quote. Do you see that?
I see that. You said it's
Wow.
my third opinion. That is not my opinion.
All right. But in this pleading, it says that you will testify to that, correct?
Yes, that's what this says.
Okay. And that was not your opinion in February 2021, was it?
No, as I said, I had not formed any opinions at that time. I had just been retained.
Ok.
And in fact, you have never arrived at this opinion as an expert witness in this case, correct?
In terms, no, the opinions that I've rendered are provided in my report.
And
And they're what I'm testifying to today.
And you have never arrived at this opinion as an expert witness in this case, correct?
I'll sustain it.
You have never arrived at the opinion that Ms. Heard exhibits patterns of behavior that suggest her allegations of abuse against Mr. Depp are false, correct?
That's correct.
Okay. And in fact, you've said that has never been my opinion, correct?
What I'm saying is that the opinions in here, these are not my opinions. My opinions are provided in my report.
Can you please turn to page 255 of your deposition?
Esta gaja é bocado. Esta advogada é lixada. Mesmo
We
assim.
can start on 254 to give the
I don't have
context.
that page, I'm sorry.
254, line 11.
Oh, okay.
And the question is now, the next one is, quote, Ms. Heard exhibits patterns of behavior that suggest her allegations of abuse against Mr. Depp are false, end of quote. Was that your
Qual
opinion in
delas?
February 2021? And you answered at that time, no, correct?
That is correct.
And then I asked, have you ever arrived at that opinion in the time that you have served as an expert witness in this case? And your answer was, could you read that to the jury, please?
Yes, so no, it's not the task. I was cut off, or I.
Yeah, isto dava filme do caralho, digo-te já.
No,
Por
that's
acaso
not
sim.
the task of dash. That was never my task to determine. Can I say what that means?
No, and then the question is, so is it fair to say that you have, no, and then,
Task of dash. That was never my task to determine. Can I say what that means?
no, and then the question is, so is it fair to say that you have never arrived at an opinion that, quote, Ms. Heard
A gaja tipo proíbe a pessoa de explicar, bro.
allegations of abuse against Mr. Depp are false.
Então a testemunha está lá para fazer o quê, bro? Mano, está-se a rir porque o gajo já proibiu de explicar o que é que ele quis.
I'll read it for you if you're having difficulty.
no,
Your answer was under oath correct.
Aí,
That
mano,
is
esta
not
gaja
my
é mesmo
opinion.
estúpida.
That has never been my opinion. Isn't that what
Correct,
you said under
yes.
oath on March 21st? Okay. And then I wrote, then I'm going to ask you, do you know who wrote this portion of the designation suggesting that these were your opinions in February of 2021? And what was your answer?
I said no.
Now, as of the time of this initial expert designation,
Aí, esta gaja apetece-lhe bater na outra.
any opinions, correct?
I believe I had just started to review materials. I believe that I indicated that in my declaration.
Claro, bro.
I
Recebem
have
para
not yet
caraças.
rendered any opinions.
Bué
I,
mesmo.
hadn't completed my review and I hadn't conducted an evaluation.
Okay. And in fact, you've never testified as an expert on IPV, intimate partner violence, isn't that correct?
I believe that is correct, but I may not be remembering all of my cases.
So let's go to page 200.
Okay?
Olha, já confirmou que vai fazer um filme sobre isto e já escolheram quem vai representar. Mads Mikkelsen como Depp e a psicóloga como a Amber. Ah, bom, ok.
My question was, have you ever testified as an expert on IPV? And your answer under oath then at line 22 was what?
Oh gosh, let me catch up. Line 22. No.
And you've never testified as an expert on emotional distress damages associated with IPV, is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay. And you've never been asked to testify with respect to emotional damages associated with domestic violence or abuse, isn't that correct?
Again, I'm reluctant to say that's correct because with 15 years of experience, a lot of my cases have been complex and that may have been a component, but I don't remember explicitly a case being just about that.
Let's go to
Correct.
page 199, line 20. My question to you was, have you ever been asked to testify with respect to emotional
Mano, mas isso eles têm os dois, né?
violence or abuse?
Não sei, ó.
And your answer under oath at that time was,
No,
I've not, right?
sorry, I
Isn't that
haven't
what
found
you
the
said?
page in time,
Okay, you said, no, I've not.
but I have
correct?
not.
Okay. Now, you also have never been asked to testify on whether an
Cool.
individual is being truthful in saying that they are a survivor of IPV, is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay. And you have never qualified as an expert to speak to whether a person suffered from IPV, intimate partner violence.
Pois é isso
or
que eu
was a
quero
victim
perceber.
or
Depois a
survivor
Amber,
of
é
IPV,
isso.
is that
Porque ela vai ainda falar.
That's outside the task of a psychologist to determine whether an event occurred. We assess behavior, we assess
Está toda a
mental
gente a dizer
status,
que
we
esta
don't
psicóloga é
detect
tipo.
crimes.
É gira, é não
So
sei
you
o
have
quê.
not been
Puto,
asked to testify to that.
calma, homens.
It's not something that occurs, so no, I have not.
And you were not ultimately asked to provide any opinions on that, correct?
No, I was not.
Okay. Now, you did not disclose in any of the designations or
É pá,
your
sim, mas
report
calma,
that
jovens
you had
dinâmicos.
met with and had dinner and drinks with Mr. Depp, did you?
I'm sorry, can you repeat that one more time?
Yes,
That
you did
confused
not
me.
disclose.
Mas ela tem
in
30 e
any of the
poucos.
designations or in your report that you had dinner and drinks with Mr. Depp, correct?
I did not disclose that I was interviewed by the legal team, no.
Jesus Christ.
I asked a different question.
Então pergunta outra
Are
vez.
you trying to resist that you didn't have dinner with Mr. Depp and drinks?
I'm not trying to resist that, but it's not quite right.
Pois.
You
What
did
you're
have dinner with
stating.
Mr. Depp, did you not?
I did, with
And
his
you had
legal
drinks
team
with
and Mr.
Depp,
Depp.
did you not?
And what?
You had drinks with Mr. Depp, did you not?
Drinks were served. This was over 2 years ago. I may have had a drink with dinner, yes,
In fact, you thought you had a mule something, right?
possibly.
Yes, okay. And you didn't disclose that you had met with Mr. Depp, Mr. Waldman, Mr. Chu, and Ms. Vasquez at Mr. Depp's house for 3 to 4 hours and had dinner and drinks, correct?
I did not disclose that. It's not significant to the report.
Pois. What the fuck?
You don't think that's significant, correct?
I don't.
Okay, but you've never been asked to meet with a client in his counsel before being retained as an expert, either before or after, have you?
No.
And you justified that it was okay in this case because it was a high-profile case.
Claro.
That's not quite right. I justified it in this case. Actually, I sought consultation about it. First of all, the person who had retained his attorneys was unable to come to my office with his attorneys. And yes, this is a very visible case. It's been going on a very long time. And I understood that there would be a need to interview me and make an informed decision about my qualifications.
Pronto. Justificado. Qual é o problema? Não, o que ela está a dizer é que ela foi basicamente festejar com eles antes do processo. É isso que ela está a querer dizer.
Line 3 is my question. Would you agree it's highly irregular to meet with the subject in a litigation?
Ai meu
And
Deus.
your answer on that occasion was...
Ela vai continuar ali sempre a amarrar nisto, querem
I
ver?
would say it's not something that I would typically do. However, I had not yet been retained on the case. This was a large, high-profile case, and I understood that I believed that it was appropriate for a person retaining me with
Epá,
such a high profile.
acho que não convém, acho que vai contra o código deontológico.
Essentially with the attorney's
Mas neste caso eles não foram sair, puto. Ela foi ser entrevistada pela equipa deles.
Yes, that's what you said under oath, correct?
Yes.
Só isso.
And then I said, have you ever done that before? And you said, no. Correct?
Correct.
And then I said, have you ever done it since? And you said, no. Correct?
Correct.
Okay. Now, would you agree that
Johnny
if
Depp is a
you
handsome man.
did not find something that would be in favor of Mr. Depp and a negative to Ms. Heard, that you wouldn't be an expert in this case?
Eh?
That I can bring
Essentially-
you into court if you're going to say that Ms. Heard is right and Mr. Depp is wrong, correct?
So, as a forensic psychologist, my obligation
Hey,
is to the
puto,
court,
okay.
is to the fact finder. I present science regardless of what that science may be.
Claro.
Now, when I take a case, my retainer agreement is explicit about that, and I
Dr.
discuss
Creer,
that
I'm
with the
just asking
attorneys.
you, I'm asking you a question. I'd like you to try to answer my
Okay.
question. You understand that if you found favorably to Ms. Heard and negatively to Mr. Depp, you wouldn't be here, right? You wouldn't be testifying.
Claro.
Okay, sorry.
Hold on. The objection is speculation.
That's not speculation.
No, I'll sustain the objection if you want to ask.
Okay. If,
RIP.
it goes to bias, Your Honor.
I sustain the objection. Next question.
Okay, all right.
Que ganda RIP, bro. Que ganda RIP, que estouro, puto. Mano, a juíza mandou-lhe um estouro, puto. A gaja ficou sem saber o que é que havia a dizer, puto. Mano, é que imagina, eu vou explicar mais ou menos, já daquilo que eu percebi. Basicamente, tipo, as objections servem para isto, ou seja, a advogada da Amber Heard, aquilo que ela quis fazer foi perguntar à psicóloga se ela não tivesse encontrado uma coisa a favor do Johnny Depp e contrário à Amber Heard, se ela achava que ia estar, aliás, se ela sabia que não ia estar a testemunhar neste caso. E isso é especulação, porque podia estar, percebem? Mike, obrigado pelos 15 meses, meu. Obrigadíssimo, obrigado. Obrigadíssimo, pá, obrigado. Obrigado, pá, obrigado pelos 15 meses. Obrigado, Vera, obrigado pelos 15 meses. E, ou seja, é especulação. O gajo fez objection, tipo objection speculation, e a juíza diferiu, ou seja, basicamente disse que sim, que tinha razão. Tipo, que era especulação. E a gaja basicamente tipo, ficou entalada porque não sabia como reformular a pergunta. Porque eles, quando levam como objection, eles têm que reformular a pergunta de forma a que não entre em conflito com aquilo com a objeção do outro advogado, do advogado de defesa, percebem? Portanto, neste caso, lixas-te. Tipo, podes não te lixar se fores bom advogado e souberes dar a volta às coisas. Neste caso, ela lixou-se, percebem?
You were, in fact, so excited about being involved in this case that you told your husband, even though this was a highly confidential matter, that you were going to be conducting the examination of Ms. Heard, didn't you?
That is not accurate.
You not only told your husband, but you told Ms. Heard that you told your husband, correct?
Ms. Bredehoff, that is not accurate.
What is accurate?
You're incorrect. That is not correct.
Is your testimony today under oath that you did not tell your husband that you were going to be conducting the examination of Amber?
That is my testimony. Okay.
Ela está a dizer que basicamente trouxe muffins. What the fuck? Ela basicamente está a dizer que ela contou ao marido. E ela disse que não.
Let's go to page 306.
Não, ela disse tipo ao marido que ia participar no caso, mas aparentemente não disse, que ela está a dizer que é mentira isto. Pode ter sido uma trick question esta. Olha a Camila Vasquez. A Camila Vasquez é a
The
advogada.
question that was asked was because you brought muffins, you said from your husband, right? And you gave those to Miss Heard, correct?
O quê, meu? Pera, what? Como?
So the question that was asked was because you brought muffins, you said from your husband, right? And you gave those to Miss Heard, correct?
May I clarify what occurred so that we can stop talking about the muffins? What happened was that I was getting ready that morning.
Ai, o caraças, puto. Mano, é que estas pessoas dão todas um ganda baile à equipa legal da gaja, mano. Tipo, eu não sei como é que é possível, bro. É que, mano...
muffins to the office. My husband did happen to know that there was going to be a celebrity client coming in because on the mornings that occurs, which often occurs, we have to actually clear the office and move the staff to the other office. So yes, on the one hand, he was aware of that. I was getting ready. I asked him to go to the bakery near our house and pick up the muffins for me because I was running late. He often has to do that because I often do run late. He brought the muffins back to the house. I brought them into the office. Ms. Heard and I enjoyed the muffins together. I think I made a comment to her along the lines like, we can thank my husband. My husband got these for us today, meaning he purchased the muffins. We are now enjoying them because of him.
Did you say on pages 305 and 306 that you frequently have examinations of high-profile clients?
Sim.
You want to just take a quick look and tell us?
What, 305, 306?
Yeah, that's where we're talking about it.
Is there a line you'd like me to look at?
You can start with 15, line 15, 305. Just read through that and tell me whether you said anywhere in there that you have a lot of high-profile examinations. You do this frequently.
Eu não percebo o que é que...
I don't agree.
Orange approach, please.
Pimba. Mais uma objection. Mano, como reagiste com as tuas entradas no cabelo? É uma pergunta legit. Estou a ficar com entradas também. Está a fazer o psicológico. Oh, putz, what the fuck, bro? Mano, imagina. Reagir normalmente, putz. É uma coisa natural do ser humano, bro. Qual é que é a cena, puto? Olha, se ficar careca, fiquei, puto. Rapo o cabelo e fico feliz. Já, mano, what the fuck? Isso é perfeitamente normal, bro. Como assim afetar o teu psicológico? Não, meu Deus, o meu teclado. Foda-se. Puta que pariu. Derramei chá em cima do teclado. God damn it. Deixa-me ver se há alguma... Ok, tá. Ok, tá. 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 Estão todas. Está tudo a funcionar. Não foi chá,
Why
puto.
did your husband get
Foda-se.
the muffins for Amber Heard?
He did not get the muffins for Amber Heard.
He knew you had a high-profile client
Mano, ela está-se a rir, puto. Ela se está a rir, puto.
for Amber Heard.
He did not get the muffins for Amber Heard.
Até ela se ri, puto. E que isto é ridículo, bro. What the
He knew
fuck?
you had a high-profile client, and you were preparing for a very long time, and you asked him to pick up the muffins, correct?
I asked him to pick up the muffins for me, yes.
Okay. Now, would you agree that domestic abuse can be verbal?
Absolutely, yes.
Would you agree that domestic abuse can be emotional?
Yes, certainly.
Would you agree that domestic abuse can be psychological?
Yes.
Would you agree that domestic abuse can be...
Chivaldo.
Yes.
Now, you indicated, and I believe you testified...
Como é que está o live,
correct,
malta?
It's very important to review the
Ainda está a gaja.
before forming opinions, is that correct?
Yes.
Okay, in fact, that's the first thing you would do, correct?
Deixa eu ver.
Not necessarily the first, but it's part of the evaluation.
Yeah, ainda está a mulher a falar. Foda-se.
Let's go to page 261.
Bro, isto é bué da tenso. Eu curto bué. Estou curtindo bué de ver esta merda.
And let's go to 260 because that's where I start the question. The question I asked.
O que é que fizeste, Roderick? Não
Whether
sei.
you'd review any of these by the designation on February 19, 2021.
Ok. Normal eles gravarem estas coisas. Não é normal, mas eles basicamente, tipo, concordaram. Foi a equipa legal do Johnny Depp que fez força para eles gravarem isto. E esta gaja que está a falar, a advogada da Amber Heard, disse que não queria que isto fosse filmado. E a juíza que está a presidir este caso disse que aceitava que fosse gravado. Ou que fosse filmado.
You didn't diagnose, you didn't actually have a DSM-5 diagnosis that Amber Heard suffers from either borderline personality disorder or histrionic personality disorder, correct?
That's not correct.
In fact, your report
That's not correct.
says Ms. Heard demonstrates psychological symptoms of a combined borderline and histrionic personality disorder. Would you agree?
Yes, I did say that in also what designation was that? I believe January 18th that report was included? Yes.
Okay. And that's what you said at that time, correct?
Yes.
Okay.
I said a little bit more than that as well.
You said, and I'll read it, I'll quote it, quote, based on the combined results of my interview with Ms. Heard, behavioral observations, psychometric test data, and review of the available records, Ms. Heard demonstrates psychological symptoms of a combined borderline and histrionic personality disorder, BHPD. That's what you wrote in your report as one of your conclusions, correct?
And that's a DSM-5 diagnosis.
And it did not say that you were diagnosing with a DSM-5 for borderline personality disorder or histrionic personality disorder.
Bro, uma combinação das duas.
It says in different semantics.
Oh, so what you meant to say.
It did not use the words you just said.
Now, let's talk about the treatment records that you said that you reviewed. But I'm going to start with Rocky Pennington. Your testimony was that out of the blue, Amber hit Rocky Pennington, correct?
I can't remember exactly what I said, but I did reference Ms. Pennington's deposition that Ms. Heard struck Ms. Pennington in the face.
In fact, Ms. Pennington testified that she hit Ms. Heard. And in response to that, she can't recall, but Ms. Heard either pushed or slapped her, correct?
I don't recall.
That's a pretty important distinction, don't you think?
My recollection is that there was some sort of violence both ways in the relationship. Either way, it seemed that both of them might have been unstable. I'm only evaluating Ms. Heard.
So now we have an evaluation of Rocky Pennington?
No, I just said, but that...
Mas quem é que é Rocky Pennington? What the fuck?
I'm only evaluating Ms. Heard.
But you testified to that undirected. That was a factor, right?
Yes.
Okay. Well...
Raquel Pennington. Artes marciais.
Amber struck first or just responded back?
Given the dynamic, not necessarily. No, it would not have.
So now you're
Mas
an
que é que
expert on
tinha? Eram
Rocky
amigas?
Pennington and her dynamics with
Rocky Pennington gives out the state of the journey.
Okay, so now let's talk about Dr. Cowan. You not only reviewed his treatment records and his
Esta gaja,
text
Rocky
messages and documents, but you also attended his deposition.
Ex-mulher da Heard.
Yes.
Okay, and do you recall Dr. Cowan testifying that Amber told him about Depp physically abusing her contemporaneous with the events?
I don't recall specifically his words, but I remember him recalling that she had disclosed abuse in their treatment, yes.
And do you recall Dr. Cowan testifying that he received a text message contemporaneous?
Sim, acho que sim.
Johnny did a number on me tonight. I'm safe in my support tonight, but I need some real help. Do you remember him testifying to that?
I don't remember the testimony, but I do remember seeing that text message as one of the exhibits.
And do you remember Dr. Cowan testifying that on another occasion, Amber sent him a text, Johnny beat me up pretty good last night, end of quote.
Again,
Not in this instance. She can rely on it. She testified.
Overruled.
Thank you. Thank you, Your Honor. I didn't need to argue that hard, I guess. Do you recall that?
Again, I don't recall the testimony, but I do remember that being an exhibit. I've seen it.
Do you recall Dr. Cowan testifying that not only did he believe Amber in her reporting of the abuse by Depp, but that she had no ulterior motive?
I actually don't recall that. I'm not saying that it didn't occur.
Okay. Do you recall Dr. Cowan testifying that he believed the relationship was toxic and he was concerned for Amber's physical well-being?
Não sei, Félix.
I do recall him saying that he believed the relationship was toxic.
Okay.
And you don't recall
I
Dr.
do not.
Cowan saying that he was concerned for Amber's physical well-being?
I don't remember those exact words.
Okay.
Do you recall Dr. Cowan testifying in that deposition that you were present for, referring to Mr. Depp, quote, his controlling nature, jealousy and suspiciousness, addiction to drugs and alcohol, and violent and indulgent temper? Do you recall him using those terms to describe Mr. Depp?
I remember thinking that would be an inappropriate impression for a treating provider of a different person to give, but I do recall him making that statement.
Do you recall Dr. Cowan testifying that if he pushed her, she was going to push him back? And I never had the impression that she was the provocateur, but that she was indicating to me she had a hard time, de-escalating these types of situations.
Yes.
Okay. And do you also recall him saying that she didn't say she pushed him, she just said, I got right back up? She told me that he pushed her down and she got right back up.
I remember him saying that Ms. Heard told him that, yes.
And do you
Okay.
recall him testifying, you could interpret it that way? I kind of interpret it more, metaphorically, that when somebody comes at her, she goes back at them, in a similar way, whether it's verbally or she protects herself. Do you recall that?
I recalled something along those lines, but it was a 6 or 7 hour deposition, so the specifics are not fresh in my mind.
Do you recall Dr. Cowan specifically testifying that he believed
Acho que é só em
her
tribunal,
when
sim.
she reported the physical abuse by Mr. Depp?
I recall him saying that and following it up with a statement that you have to take the patient at their word when you're the therapist.
You recall that?
Yes?
Do you recall him saying that he believed her? That he found her believable?
Yes, that he found her believable.
Okay. Now, you also...
Malta, não vou tirar as legendas porque há pessoal que não está a perceber muito bem e então com as
Yes.
legendas
And
pode ser que
before we go
funcione.
there, Dr. Cowan
E que facilite.
has been a clinical psychologist for 40 years, correct?
I'm not sure.
Okay, well, he testified to that, didn't he, in the deposition?
I don't recall.
And he also saw Amber Heard for over 2 years, correct?
Yes.
From 2014, approximately August 2014 to 2016, correct?
Yes, he did.
For a period of time, would you agree? Okay. And he also testified that he did not diagnose Amber with borderline personality disorder. Do you recall that testimony?
He also testified that he doesn't use diagnoses, but yes, I do recall that.
And do you recall
Wow.
that it was those words were in his notes, but he said he had written that down, but then he discounted it and determined that that was not correct for her.
You want to approach?
The fuck? Ok, eles não filmam as Olha o Johnny a rir-se, puto. A gaja está sempre toda fodida,
Now
bro.
let's jump to Amy Banks. Dr. Banks is a psychiatrist, correct?
Yes.
And in fact, she went to medical school at Georgetown and she did her psychiatric training at Harvard Medical School, correct?
I believe that's correct. I don't recall 100%.
All right, and she was a psychiatrist in Massachusetts that Amber Heard had reached out to
Yes.
after the Australia incident to try to help her relationship with Mr. Depp, correct?
Ok.
Let me back up. You attended Dr. Banks' deposition as well, did you not?
Yes, I did.
And Dr. Banks testified to that, correct?
I don't remember if she testified to that. I don't have the notes right in front of me or the deposition transcript.
All right.
Ok.
Do you recall Dr. Banks testifying that she understood
Bro, isto
that
é
Amber was in
muito
a
amarado.
relationship with Johnny Depp that had gotten violent and out of control?
I don't recall specifically, no.
Bro, isto é tipo... Mano, ela está-lhe a fazer perguntas sobre uma merda que aconteceu há 2 anos atrás. Que tem 7 horas de comprimento. Como é que ela... Ou de duração. Como é que ela há de se lembrar de tudo, bro?
I don't recall.
Especificamente. Claro que não se vai
Do you
lembrar.
recall Amy Banks testifying that Amber was reporting the violence by Mr. Depp and it was not consensual?
I recall Dr. Banks stating that Ms. Heard was reporting violence to her, yes. I do not recall a statement about consent.
Pois.
Do you recall Dr. Banks testifying that there was discussion about Mr. Depp cutting off his finger, and she said only that it was a middle of one of these very kind of out of control escalated fights, and that did make a fairly big impact on me.
I remember something like that.
All right. And do you recall Dr. Banks saying it was a whole other level? As I remember, it told to me he actually cut off a part of his finger during one of these altercations, meaning to me, the way I digested that, if you will, was that things had gotten particularly out of control.
I do not recall that exact statement. I'm not saying it didn't occur, I just can't recall it.
All right. And you recall that Mr. Depp was in sessions with Ms. Heard with Dr. Banks, correct?
Yes. My understanding, however, is that they met with Dr. Banks and then it was primarily Ms. Heard meeting with Dr. Banks for treatment after prescriptions and therapy.
All right. And do you recall Dr. Banks saying that she was not surprised that Amber was seeking a restraining order because of the violence that she knew existed?
Sim, a advogada da Amber é a gaja que está a falar
I do
agora.
recall that, and it would be impossible to know that violence exists as a treating therapist or as a psychologist. Again, we're not
Sim, Slime.
investigators.
Vou vendo os
However,
highlights.
I do recall
Ontem
that she
vimos mais
said
do
that
que
because I remember having
o
that
normal.
thought.
And do you recall Amy, and she's a psychiatrist, right?
Psychiatrist.
Okay. And do you recall Amy Banks saying that it was clear to her that Mr. Depp was the one who initiated the violence?
I don't recall that.
Ok.
All right. Do you recall that Dr. Banks said that she knew for certain that Mr. Depp was the one who had committed the violence because Ms. Heard reported it in the presence of Mr. Depp and he did not contradict?
I do not recall that.
Okay. And do you recall that Dr.
Cara
Banks
dele.
ultimately concluded that it was her belief that Amber was a victim of domestic violence at the hands of Mr. Depp?
Here, you want to approach this?
Lá vai ele. Ou seja, ela basicamente... Pá, pois ele acha que aquilo é mentira. Epá, isto é bué da estranho, porque este caso é bué da fedido. Este caso é mesmo bué da fedido. Quem é aquela gaja que está ali de sweatshirt, bro? Sentada na cena na Legal Team. Olha, um post-it. Bro, passou-lhe um post-it e ela riu-se. São estes pormenores, bro.
And what was your answer to that last one? I'm
Como é que é, Rita?
I think I can't recall, but I also can't recall that last question.
Do you recall that Dr. Banks concluded that Amber was a victim of domestic
Um
violence
autógrafo.
with Mr. Depp?
I don't recall that.
Okay. Now, you also reviewed the records of Laurel Anderson and you reviewed her deposition, is that correct?
Mano, isto é um caso de difamação. Isto é um processo de difamação do Johnny Depp à Amber
I
Heard.
reviewed Dr. Anderson's deposition, yes.
Okay, and do you recall that she reported that Amber Heard had reported physical violence by Mr. Depp to her?
I recall that she said that Ms. Heard had reported that, yes.
Okay, and do you recall that she said that it changed over time?
I don't recall that specifically.
É que isto é um processo com bué de... Tipo, isto é um caso com bué de anos, meu. É fedidíssimo.
Her face being bruised after the December 15, 2015 incident?
I don't recall that.
You don't recall that, okay.
Não, aqui a julgada é a Amber por difamação. O Johnny já
Do
foi.
you recall that Dr. Anderson said that Amber had reported that he had pulled out her hair, bruised her face, kicked her leg, and hit her in the head?
Yes, Ms. Heard did report that to her according to her testimony.
Num artigo que ela escreveu para o Washington Post ou uma merda qualquer.
I don't recall that specifically.
Okay. And do you recall that Dr. Anderson said she believed that Amber Heard was a victim of domestic abuse at the hands of Mr. Depp?
I recall, no, I don't recall that statement.
All right, let's go to Bonnie Jacobs.
Yeah.
You said that you reviewed the notes from Bonnie Jacobs, correct?
E tu vês a frustração da advogada por ela não estar a cair na cena dela. Como é que é, Nuno?
Was that you discounted these because the first notes from Bonnie Jacobs indicated that she already had all of these symptoms, correct?
I'm sorry, I don't understand what you're saying. I discounted.
Tell me why you discounted Bonnie Jacobs' notes.
I did not discount Bonnie Jacobs' notes.
You said that Bonnie Jacobs, in her notes, had already determined that these symptoms were present for Amber Heard before the relationship with Mr. Depp, did you not?
What I recall saying was that within Dr. Jacobs' notes, she's documented instances in which Ms. Heard reported to her over the course of therapy that she was experiencing nightmares, recurrent nightmares, in fact, about childhood abuse.
Okay. Now, the very first entry on Bonnie Jacobs' notes, and these are the notes, right? Do you recognize these?
Não, malta, imaginem a cena do Depp. Malta, isto é mais complicado do que isso.
All right, so the first of Bonnie Jacobs' notes is on.
Basicamente, o Johnny Depp meteu este processo de difamação à Amber Heard porque quer finalmente ter um espaço para se defender destas acusações. Têm sido feitas ao longo dos anos. O caso tinha sido resolvido com o divórcio. Só que a Amber Heard foi fazer um artigo passado uns anos a falar de ter sofrido violência doméstica. Não disse nomes, mas toda a gente presumiu que era o Johnny Depp. Percebem? Atualmente o Johnny Depp, depois desse artigo ter sido publicado, perdeu trabalhos, inclusive os Fantastic Beasts e os Piratas das Caraíbas, e agora está a processar a Amber Heard por difamação. É só isso. Quer limpar a imagem dele, sim.
I'm not sure what you mean by many.
How many would you say?
I don't know. I don't have the notes in front of me.
Okay, well, what do you recall in deciding to make your opinions in this case?
Well, I'm confused about the dates because I know that Dr. Jacobs treated Ms. Heard even while she was in her prior relationship, leaving her prior relationship with her last wife.
Dr. Curry, I'm not going to ask you to try to bring in extraneous things. I'm asking you what you recall of these
But
notes.
The dates would have been different based on that alone.
Okay.
And I recall that there was quite a bit of information because these were copious notes spanning back in time from her relationship with Tasha.
So Dr. Curry, please answer my question. How many occasions do you recall Dr. Jacobs documenting Amber reporting physical abuse?
I don't know.
Ela recebeu basicamente dinheiro do divórcio.
You also said that you listened to audio tapes in this case, correct?
Yes.
Did you hear Mr. Depp admitting to headbutting Ms. Heard?
Não porque ele disse que não quer.
That is not what I heard.
You didn't hear that?
I heard a conversation about headbutting. I did not hear him, as you said, admit to headbutting Ms. Heard.
Okay, that's your characterization of it, correct?
Yes.
Okay. Did you see the videotape?
Ok, diz ele.
Yes.
Okay, did Ms. Heard imagine that or create that, or was she responsible for that somehow?
Sim.
I'll sustain the objection. Next question.
Okay.
A cara deste gajo.
What, if any, impact did that have on your opinions watching Mr. Depp in that video?
I'm not sure it was one of many pieces of the exhibits and other collateral data that I considered. I'm not sure what the direct impact was or if that could be measured.
All right. Now, counsel asked you whether you had conducted any type of examination on Mr. Depp, and I believe your answer was no, correct?
No.
You did not review any medical records or psychological records from Mr. Depp either, did you?
I reviewed all of the records that were available.
Do you recall reviewing medical and psychological records on Mr. Depp?
Yes.
Do you recall Dr. Blaustein referring to Mr. Depp?
Bro, ele nunca mais fez filmes de grande escala. Como assim não ficou?
No, I actually.
Estás a gozar? Foi despedido dos grandes projetos que tinha. Nunca mais fez grandes blockbusters e tu dás-me a dizer que a carreira dele não foi arruinada, puto. Estás a gozar comigo?
I transcribed
Que ele foi mais foi arruinado.
I may be missing a time when I said that about Mr. Depp. The handwriting was very difficult to transcribe, but there was one instance in which I recall transcribing him.
Quais coisas?
Stating
Quais coisas é que eu acho que são
Mr.
verdade?
Depp reported that Ms. Heard had
Eu acho que eles tinham uma relação bastante tóxica. Quem é que bateu a quem é difícil de saber. Não tenho dúvidas nenhumas que a gaja lhe tenha batido. Isso não tenho dúvidas nenhumas. Nem lhe mandado com merdas e o caraças. Se ele lhe bateu a ela em alguma instância, não sei, bro. Mas lá está, foi violência, na minha opinião, foi violência recíproca. Foi tipo de um ao outro, de um para o outro. Portanto, a partir desse momento, não sei lá.
Like his mother or his sister that he didn't like?
I haven't seen his deposition. I don't recall that.
Okay. Now, did you see and do you know whether Mr. Depp has ever been diagnosed with any personality disorders?
That's not relevant to my task to conduct an evaluation of Ms. Heard. So I do not know that he has had one. It was not in the records that he did.
All right. So one way or the other, you don't know whether Mr. Depp suffers from any personality disorders.
That's not my task.
Okay. Let me go to IPV perpetrators. Would you agree that accusations of infidelity can be considered one of the characteristics of a personality perpetrator of IPV?
It can be a characteristic of a lot of things. It is something that can be weaponized if somebody is trying to or is having rage toward their partner.
Go on.
Let's go to page 270.
Foi por causa do James Franco. O James Franco não ia depor aqui também. E o Paul Bettany, supostamente, disseram que eles iam depor.
Line 3, my question was, are accusations of infidelity considered one of the characteristics of a perpetrator, a personality perpetrator of IPV?
O Elon Musk também? What?
The objection.
The question is vague and ultimately ambiguous.
I don't understand the objection.
I'll overrule the objection.
Okay. And your answer under oath
Can
at
you
that
remind
time,
me of the page? I thought
page
it was
270, line 3 was where my question was.
What the
And
fuck,
your answer was
bro?
at line 8. You said it can be, correct?
Mhm. Yes.
Okay. And interrogating your partner about unfounded accusations of infidelity can be abusive. Would you agree?
It can be if they're unfounded, yes.
Okay. And psychological
O
consequences.
Depp já falou bué da vez,
for
ela ainda não.
Victim of IPV can include diminished self-esteem, correct?
Yes.
Oh, bro,
Depressed
foda-se.
mood?
Yes.
Eu respeitava o Elon Musk porque ele tirou uma foto com o Travis Scott. E bro, tirar fotos com um gajo que deixa pessoas a sofrer nos concertos dele realmente é uma grande forma de orgulho. Espetáculo, hein, bro? Foda-se, que respeito que eu devia ter para esse gajo tirar fotos com o Travis Scott. Que grande figura que é o Travis Scott, é uma figura de respeito.
Yes.
Now, Amber's medical examination, she was cooperative, correct?
Her psychological, yes. She was cooperative and polite.
And in the 2 full days of examination, you felt she was polite and answered all your questions, except in one instance where she furrowed her brow when you were asking about friendships in high school, correct?
That's not correct.
All right, let's go to page 275.
Foda-se, ela teve aqui bué de tempo a interrogá-la. Ok, ela ainda aqui está, puto. Quanto tempo é que esta
So we
gaja...
start on 274 with the, was she polite? You said yes. Was she cooperative? Yes. Did she answer your questions? For the most part, yes. This is, now we're on page 275, lines 4 and 5. And
Quanto
then my
tempo
question
falta?
was, did she
Foda-se.
become combative
Vai numa hora.
or
Faltam 40
or
minutos.
angry? And your answer was, there was one instance in which she appeared annoyed and the posturing forward a bit, more assertive tone, furrowed brow, when I was questioning something, following up on data that had been inconsistent about friendships in high school. Other than that, she was very polite. Is that your answer at that time?
That was my answer at that time, and it's inconsistent with the question you had just asked me.
Wow.
And would you agree that appearing for this examination with an expert who had been retained by Mr. Depp more than a year earlier might be a little stressful?
Yes.
Okay. And in fact, not only had you been retained by Mr.
Claro,
Depp,
mas isso é o objetivo
but what had been communicated
dos advogados
by
da
Mr. Depp's
Heard.
team was that you had called Amber Heard a liar and a perpetrator of abuse, correct?
Como é lógico, esse é o objetivo
I'd
deles.
like
Tipo,
to
não podes
clarify
ficar
that
lixado
I
por eles
was
estarem a
not
fazer
retained
isso.
by Mr. Depp. I was retained by Mr. Depp's counsel. And what I can say that, yes, any examinee in a forensic context, you would consider that they're probably stressed.
All right, would you agree that all perpetrators of IPV have anger management issues?
Yes.
And a large portion of IPV perpetrators have substance abuse issues.
Oh, bro.
Not, it's one of many factors that correlates with intimate partner violence, but there are certainly many people who perpetuate intimate partner violence who do not have substance abuse issues.
All right, let's go to 131.
Estão sempre a empurrar a narrativa do gajo consumir. Tipo, a ele não lhe fazem perguntas nenhumas sobre esta merda, mas estão sempre a enterrar o homem com a merda da substance abuse, puto.
Yes, line 12 is what I have here. And I'm talking about, you said, and just to give context, remember I was asking you what percentage of people you treat
No,
perpetrators,
no.
and you'd said 5%. Do you recall that, just for some?
Olha o Ben Shu e a Camila Vasquez.
Okay, and then I said, of the 5% that are IPV perpetrators that
Não,
you
não estamos a ver o
treated
direto, estamos a ver as coisas há
how many
umas
of
horas
these
antes.
perpetrators have substance abuse issues? And your answer was?
I see that I answered with a figure of speech, a large portion.
Okay, thank you. And it's common for the perpetrator to essentially
Por acaso ainda não vi
the
isso.
victim,
Gostaria de
accuse
ver.
them of being the perpetrator.
Are
Would you
you in
agree?
a different area, or are you asking me a
I'm
separate
asking
question?
you a question.
Oh.
And it's
Sorry,
common.
can you please repeat it?
Yes, and it's common for the perpetrator to essentially gaslight the victim, accuse them of being the perpetrator. Would you agree? That's exactly how it was asked in the deposition. so
I understand it is a compound question. I'll
Okay.
sustain the objection.
It's common for the
Okay.
perpetrator to essentially gaslight. I don't think that's, Your Honor, I think it's just one question. Let me try it. To gaslight the victim, isn't it?
That's a characteristic of psychological abuse, yes.
Okay, and it's common.
Ela acabou de questionar a juíza e a juíza não lhe disse nada. What the fuck?
And then for them to accuse them of being the perpetrator, the victim.
That's a characteristic of abuse from women perpetrated against men. It's actually very, very common. About 90% of male victims of IPV have reported that a female partner who abuses them makes threats to report their partner as an abuser.
Claro.
It's less common for men to make that statement.
Bro, super previsível, né? Como é lógico. Isso é sempre aquela cena da caixa. Que é tipo, man, se fores dizer que eu te ando a bater, eu vou dizer que tu me bates a mim. Pronto. E quem é que é cancelado mais depressa? É isso, não é?
To female partners just because there's less potential consequence.
Isn't it true, though, that some form of gaslighting is often present?
São todos
in
advogados.
personality-based
Todas estas
IPV
pessoas que aqui estão,
scenarios?
esta senhora não sei, mas
Yeah.
estes três são. Camila Vasquez, Ben Shu, este senhor não sei quem é. Este é advogado e os outros dois do outro lado também.
Causes them a lot of fear,
Certainly.
and it causes them a lot of distress,
Absolutely, yes.
and in fact, they feel falsely accused, correct?
Yes,
And they feel paranoid,
yes,
and they feel frightened,
yes,
afraid that everyone's going to believe the perpetrator, correct?
Bro.
yes.
And in fact, they're afraid they're going to lose their security, correct?
Can you clarify what you mean by security?
I'll ask the next one. And they're afraid they're going to lose their reputation, correct?
Yes.
Okay.
Eu acho que é comum eles trocarem, porque faz sentido num caso haver um advogado senior, um júnior e depois há outro que é um para-law, uma cena assim. Pá, tem nomes diferentes, são 3 advogados por norma. E vão trocando por razões específicas. Não sei explicar o porquê, malta, não sou advogado.
Now, you need to have an elevated, on the MMPI, there was only one
Acho que tem a ver com quem preparou aquela testemunha
section
específica. Talvez.
elevated,
Paralegal é isso.
Elevated scores, correct?
No, that's not correct.
It was the K section, correct?
That's not correct.
Okay. And was there any elevated score over 65 on the MMPI?
I would need to take a look at it. If I provided a 25-page interpretation outline. If you're able to pull that up, I'd be happy to go over any of the individual scores for you.
Can you recall any clinical scales for the MMPI-2 for Amber Heard that were above 65 as you sit there today?
Again, there are multiple scales on this test, 25 pages worth listed. So if you can pull it up, then I can review and give you a confident answer.
Pena.
What can you recall as you sit there?
Bro, foda-se, dá-lhe.
I'm hesitant to do that because I don't want to make an error by ignoring numbers of scale scores.
And would you agree that
Epá,
you
man.
can't make a pathological determination or diagnosis if the scales are not elevated on the MMPI-2?
I would not agree with that.
Okay. Now, one of the answers that Amber
Dá
gave
apoio, ok.
is that it's hard for her to feel safe, correct?
What are you talking about the MMPI-2?
Yes.
Again, I don't recall. There are 567 items on that. I would need to see her results.
Jesus
Well, it's
Christ,
a
que
common
preciso.
trauma symptom, isn't it, to not feel safe?
Sure.
And safety concerns are common among women who have been victimized, correct?
Oh, mano, é pá.
Women and men, yes.
Okay. And
Estão sempre a
common,
empurrar a narrativa.
especially for sexually victimized people. Would you agree?
Any type of victimization, yes.
Okay. And hard to trust. That's a common after effect of interpersonal violence related trauma, correct?
Sure.
And memory difficulties. Amber said she felt she had holes. Do you recall that?
I do. And
Pronto,
her
já
trauma is
está a
different
ver.
than typical memory difficulties with trauma.
It is common for individuals who have experienced trauma.
And it's actually
to
not
have-
common. No, it's a symptom, but it's the least common.
Pimba.
In fact,
Como é que é que aprende?
DSM-5 diagnosis for PTSD includes a, quote, inability to remember an important aspect of the traumatic event, end of quote. Am I correct?
Yes.
Pronto.
And memory difficulties are a symptom of PTSD, correct?
Certain types of memory difficulties, yes.
Okay. Now, do you recall when Amber says the first incident of abuse took place?
I believe it was, the first incident in which yes. So she stated that it was early on in their relationship.
Do you recall it?
I don't recall the exact date off the top of my head.
Do you recall it being a tattoo, something related to a tattoo?
I do.
Okay. Now, if someone had been subjected to a 4-year relationship characterized by repeated IPV, they can have symptoms, correct?
Yes.
Intense anxiety,
Yes, certainly.
depressed or irritable states,
Actually, it's not so much states. When you're looking at a real trauma reaction, it's pretty persistent. It's less of these transient states.
intimate problems,
Yes.
relationship difficulties.
Yes.
And these are symptoms you're also attributing to the personality disorder, correct?
Yes, there are some key differences.
Ok.
Now let's talk for a moment specifically about a couple of the profiles on the MMPI. This is not an exaggerated profile for her, is it?
Oh, malta, não me levem a mal, mas
No,
nós estamos aqui a
actually,
ver
that
uma
was
cena que não
something
tem nada a ver
when-
com aquilo que
when
vocês
she
estão a falar no chat,
completed
mas
objective
vocês
broadband
querem ver o
measures,
jogo,
where
epá,
the
vão,
questions you don't
sei lá,
know what
comentar
questions are getting at, they
posts
seem
do
completely
Facebook, bro,
random.
tipo, não vão estar aqui a falar na
She,
stream sobre um jogo
raised
qualquer
scores
que eu nem
that
sei qual é,
indicated
bro.
that she was trying to minimize any mental issues and appear completely free
Pá,
of
mantenham-se no
pathology.
tema.
When she took tests that asked questions that were specific to trauma, that's when you'd see these extreme exaggerations.
All right, let's go to page 337.
Porra, pá, mas quando é que fala o gajo, pá? Daqui a bocado mais vale chamar o Better Call Saul. Veio o Saul Goodman. Veio o Saul Goodman para aqui. Ó gajo, já avisei, puto. Vocês vão parar ou nem por isso? Pronto, agradeço.
My question on line 7, this is not an exaggerated profile, is it, for her? And your answer under oath at that time was no, it is not an exaggerated profile. Do you see that?
Yes, we're
That's
talking
what you
about the
testified.
MMPI here.
Estou um
Yes.
bocado perdido. Este processo foi levantado por ele, certo? Sim.
Yes,
De indenização
that's
por
correct.
parte dele.
Now,
Sim, é um processo
the
de difamação.
profile is
De
also
Jesse
not
Pinkman.
consistent with malingering,
Qual é a
correct?
próxima testemunha?
The MMPI
Pá,
2
isto já aconteceu,
profile
malta.
specific to how she approached this test.
Eles depois
And
voltaram
you're
para
correct.
ver
For
o
this
depoimento
test, it was a
de uma
defensive
police
profile,
officer.
not an exaggerated profile.
So my question on line 10 was, this is not a profile consistent with malingering, correct? And your answer under oath at that time was correct. On this test, it is not consistent with malingering, period, right? That
Yes.
was your full answer.
Quem é que vai falar a seguir à police officer? Ou isto vai acabar
Now,
a seguir?
is it your testimony under oath today that you have not been asked to testify concerning Ms. Heard's behavior in the context of her relationship with Mr. Depp, including any abuse?
That's correct.
Okay. And you have not made
Epá, eu
any
acho que
determination,
não sei, bem.
including any.
Ah pá, imagina, não sei, meu, isso depois fica do lado do júri. Pá, tendo em conta a dimensão do caso,
Correct.
mesmo que o Johnny Depp não ganhe este caso, vai sempre ficar visto aos olhos do público como uma pessoa que não cometeu crime nenhum. Percebem?
Of any of the defamatory comments that she has alleged Mr. Waldman made.
Não, mano, esta é a psicóloga.
Mr. Depp made through Mr. Waldman, correct?
What I can testify is that there was no indication of a decline in psychological
Não, Luís,
functioning,
isto não é o
showing
julgamento
any
por
injury
violência
since she's been
doméstica.
You-
Isto é
you cannot
julgamento
testify
por
one way or
difamação.
another on that, correct? Your Honor, may we approach?
Okay.
Pronto, vão dar approach. Olha a Camila Vasquez. Onde é que vai a Camila Vasquez? Pronto, Johnny Depp está só ali a desfilar, que só o seu bigodinho, a beber um bocadinho da sua mug. Com aquele seu olhar transparente. Tudo. Pima, meteu outra vez o óculos de sol. A sua poker face. Puto, eu não sei, a cena dos óculos de sol mata-me. Não, este gajo, mano, imaginem, quem me dera a mim estar tão bem conservado como este gajo, puto. Este gajo está epicamente bem conservado, bro, desculpem lá. Tipo, o pessoal começou a dizer: não sei o quê, como é que esta gaja, como é que uma gaja como a Amber Heard quer andar com um velho como o Johnny Depp? Foda-se, mano. Eu se fosse uma gaja de 30 anos também queria andar com o Johnny Depp. 58, puto.
Suffered emotional
Foda-se.
distress as a result of the defamatory statements, is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay, thank you.
Exato, mano, ainda por cima um gajo que se drogou da maneira que este gajo se drogou, puto. Jesus Christ.
Dr. Curry, you were just asked a question about malingering
Yes.
and made reference to the MMPI-2. Is there another test that you did to make a determination with respect to malingering?
Yes. So I also.
O segredo é a droga.
Malingering is a term that most psychologists, we try to be careful of it because it indicates an intent for secondary gain. I prefer feigning, which you had brought up earlier, because it indicates that somebody is intentionally exaggerating, but I don't know necessarily why.
Okay.
So I think that's a more accurate term in general. On the MMPI-2, yes, there was no exaggerated profile. I also gave her the CAPS 5, I don't know if you'll remember, but that is the clinician-administered PTSD scale consistent with the DSM-5, and on that, there were signs of gross exaggeration. I also looked at the test results that were provided by Dr. Hughes, and on an objective test of trauma, there is a scale specific to intentional exaggeration on that test, and Ms. Heard was in the 98th percentile, meaning that she had engaged in extreme levels of exaggeration.
Ok.
Thank you. You
Ela
were
atrapalhou-se ali um bocado. Se tivesse sido mais clara, o júri torceu o nariz a isto.
with IPV, and you then said that there were some key differences.
Yes.
What are those?
So what you see when we're talking about the personality disorders is there is a very consistent pattern of the aggression, the violence, the irritability.
Eu curtia bué de tirar psicologia, puto. É uma cena brutal.
Second of all, it occurs when there is either, for the borderline component, a threat of abandonment, a perceived slight, feeling like the person is about to leave you, about to walk away to get some space from an argument.
Só que depois um gajo fica sem trabalho.
It also occurs to a more mild extent, but when there's a lot
A menos que, pois, exato, a menos que fossem muito bons. Por caso contrário é difícil, puto. Um gajo ter trabalho nessa área é complicado.
Or it's completely random. For instance, you might have a Vietnam vet who went straight to bars for a period to get into fights.
Bro, claro que ela parece muito mais receptiva a responder ao pessoal do Depp. Porque ela meio que deve ser uma testemunha do lado deles, com a certeza. Ela não é psiquiatra, ela é psicóloga.
Somatic symptoms, the depression, a lot of fearfulness and anxiety, but typically more complaints about somatic symptoms.
Eles já alteraram o título, foda-se. Ela é psicóloga forense.
So when you're providing therapy, you're in a very different role than an examiner. When you're the forensic examiner, you're just really looking at data to make a decision. When you're a therapist, you're an advocate for your client's well-being. And in fact, it's considered extremely unethical for a treating provider to ever provide
Jessie, tipo, psicólogo não é um médico.
Because it's so well known
São
in our
coisas
field that you're going to
completamente diferentes.
bias for your client. It's almost
Tu, quando estudas psicologia, não estudas medicina. São coisas diferentes.
Very inappropriate to convey any sort of opinion about whether a crime occurred, whether abuse occurred. We can certainly believe our clients. We can support them in their therapy.
Psicologia é uma ciência. Psiquiatria já é outra conversa.
We have to be very, very cautious and really only provide the facts. We would state things in terms of, my client did report this. I saw this. Here was our treatment plan. Here was the diagnosis. It's
Pá, ok, mas tu também, mano, imagina. Tu a jogar Fortnite também parece que estás a jogar Call of Duty, puto. Portanto, também percebo que para ti seja difícil.
Most of Ms. Heard's providers were just treating Ms. Heard. They had never so much as done an initial interview with Mr. Depp and gotten his whole life story or his symptoms or his side of any of it. And they're going to be advocating, and the treatment relationship is about helping your client achieve well-being, not making formal psychological or psychiatric.
Aí, foda-se ao gajo, para, bro. Mano, alguém tem que te parar, puto. É que ela nem sequer disse nada, puto. Isso veio out of nowhere. Puto, vocês andam-se a comer, tu e a Inês Alaska. O que é que se está a passar aqui, bro?
Dr. Anderson?
Yes, treating psychologist.
Every one of them had to take Amber Heard at his word, right?
Yes.
Puto, fogo.
Overruled.
Thank you. No further questions.
All right. Is this witness subject? Yes, sorry. Is this witness subject to recall? No. All right. Since you're subject to recall, Dr. Curry, please do not discuss your testimony with anybody, and please do not watch anything of this trial, okay? All right, thank you. You can stay there for a moment.
Okay.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, we'll go ahead and take our afternoon recess for 15 minutes. Do not do any outside research and don't talk to anybody, okay?
15 minutes. Pronto, eles ficaram 15 minutos e depois voltaram com esta gaja que ainda está a falar agora. Que é uma... Pá, deve ser uma...
And let her talk.
Did she answer any of your questions?
No, she did not.
At any point in time during the entirety of the incident, did Ms. Heard
20
answer
minutos.
any of your questions?
No, she did not.
During the entire time of the incident, did Ms. Heard complain of any injuries?
No, she did not.
Uau.
During the entirety of your time at the incident, did anybody say anything that made you believe a crime had been committed?
No, they did not.
Uau.
During the entirety of the time you were at the incident, did anybody say anything that made you believe an act of domestic violence had occurred?
No, they did not.
Portanto, ninguém disse absolutamente nada.
During the entirety of your time at the incident, did you see anything that made you
Claro.
believe a crime had occurred?
Que tenhas dúvida para queimar o gajo.
During the entirety of your time at the incident, did you hear anything that made you believe?
Não, qualquer coisa, foda-se. Então a gaja está a dizer que eles não reportaram absolutamente nada quando houve um dos acidentes que...
During the entirety of your time at the incident,
Isto é remetente a 2016. Foi num dos atos de violência que supostamente que a Amber Heard se queixa e diz que aconteceu.
I did not.
E a agente da polícia que respondeu ao local, que neste caso é esta senhora,
Never.
eles está a testemunhar, a dizer que, não, que ela não disse absolutamente nada.
Before that time.
okay.
Claro que os advogados vão fazer as perguntas que lhes interessam.
Any of the people that you encountered during the incident?
I did not.
Então não diz nada. Responda só. I did not.
At the time of the incident, did you have any reason to believe
Não faço a mínima ideia, Vasco.
anybody
Não vi.
in
Qual era a
the
testemunha?
incident, was famous?
I did not.
Ela está de máscara no vídeo porque nesta altura... Este vídeo foi gravado em março de 2021 e nessa altura o Covid estava a bater bastante na América. Portanto é possível que ela tivesse de máscara no trabalho.
Mr. Depp was affiliated or involved in the incident.
I did not.
Madam Reporter, can you repeat my last question? I lost where I was.
Já é antigo, sim. Isto é um testemunho antigo, mas está a ser mostrado agora em tribunal. Porque, entretanto, a Amber Heard... Esta senhora já não está entre nós porque a Amber Heard a matou, assassinou a sangue frio.
And there was not a response. I did not observe any injuries on Miss Heard.
Por isso é que isto é de março de 2021. Que ela fez-lhe a folha.
Observed any swelling on Ms. Heard's face?
Não foi por essa porque ainda ninguém descobriu.
Did you observe anything that led you to believe that she was a victim of domestic violence?
I did not.
Alex, if you can pull up Exhibit 2.
Agora estamos a ver uma cena de perfil. Oi? Eles metem óculos, tiram óculos, metem óculos, tiram óculos. Pá, isto confunde-me um bocado. É possível, Oli.
Exhibit 57.
Yeah.
Pois, inicialmente ela era a vítima do caso, malta. É essa a questão.
Officer Sines, do you recall having your deposition taken?
Eu já me estava ali a gostar todo. Eu neste momento no PC à minha frente estava a jogar Guild Wars. Tipo, estava a fazer Seasons of Dragons. Tipo, enquanto eles estavam ali, então, não sei o quê, tipo, a ouvir um vídeo de 2021 e eu ali no GW. Mr. Tiago, can you please go on the stand? E eu, pá caralho, pá, deixa-me jogar PVP.
Accurate and true testimony at that time.
Yes.
Faltava um achievement point. Chatos.
Said you were under oath, correct?
Correct.
Está a jogar Minesweeper. Se calhar o Johnny Depp está ali a jogar Minesweeper ou uma merda qualquer no
If
PC.
you can go to page 26. Officer Sines, do you recall testifying as to, do you recall testifying that, and I'm talking about today, do you recall just testifying that you can recall what Ms. Hurd said to you, if anything?
I do not have an independent recollection, but I can go off what I'm seeing here on my screen.
Oh, bro.
Okay.
Your Honor, we're at 5 o'clock. It looks like we have about 18 minutes left. Do you want to?
You don't have a problem finishing it tonight, do you? Let's go and finish it. Thank you.
Então vou acabar.
And do you agree with me that your memory of the
Olha o pessoal todo a bazar.
of the incident
O júri foi tipo, foi beber um latte.
July 18, 2016 than it is today?
Yes, that is correct.
Okay. And the incident was...
Olha a Camila Vasquez.
This deposition
Desculpa, acho demasiada
was
piada ao
July
nome desta senhora.
2016. How long after the incident was this deposition taken?
A few months.
Okay. And Alex, if I could have control.
Da Camila Vasquez. Exato, malta. Estamos aqui a ignorar um bocado a advogada. Estamos aqui a ignorar um bocado a advogada do Depp, hein? Que também acho que está ali nos conformes.
A little delayed off that. Can that be fixed or is that just the way it is?
Não, isto neste momento é o live. Está a acontecer agora. Esta parte já está a acontecer agora, malta. Agora estamos em direto.
Yeah, I'm afraid I can't help that. I'm sorry, Mr. Preciado.
Ainda hoje o Osmond Gold disse que graças à Amber nunca mais vamos ver o Johnny Depp a fazer de pedras. Pois não, puto. Estivemos a falar sobre isso hoje à tarde, bro. Mano, mas aquele franchise sem o Johnny Depp não é nada, mano. Vamos ser sinceros, vamos ser realistas. Eu adoro Piratas das Caraíbas, é dos meus franchises favoritos. Pá, sem o Johnny Depp, chapéu. Tipo, aquilo é muito bom. Há outros atores brutais, tipo o Geoffrey Rush faz um papelão do caraças como Barbosa. Até arrisco dizer que a Keira Knightley faz um grande papel como Elizabeth Swann. O Orlando Bloom como Will Turner. Pá, grandes papéis, ok? Tipo, agora neste último, o Javier Bardem faz tipo um papelão brutal como o vilão. Pá, espetáculo. A cena é... Pá, sem o Jack Sparrow, que é a personagem principal daquele filme, aquilo não faz sentido, meu. Perde a cena, perde a mística.
And she shook her head again, no. At that point, I asked her if she would mind if I checked her apartment. And that's when she said no. Officer, does this refresh your recollection of the conversation you had with Mr.
Ou seja, encontrar...
Yes, it does.
Tens conteúdo do GW por causa do Prime. Podes pôr para aí, Rocha, se quiseres. Pá, eu não preciso daqueles itens. Aqueles itens beneficiam mais malta que tiver para aí no chat. Portanto, mete aí o código, bro. Eu já tenho esses itens, tipo, in-game. Portanto, não preciso, bro. Obrigado. O J está a colecionar códigos desses. Eu já tenho o permanent, aquele passe. O melhor dessas merdas é aquele passe, puto. Do... Como era que se chama? Já não me lembro. Eu tenho 2 passos desses até. Permanentes. Pois é. Claro. Mano, ninguém vai ver esse Aquaman 2, bro. Vamos ser sinceros. Para já, o Aquaman... O primeiro não deu assim grande coisa. E o Aquaman 2, pá, desculpa. Não, vai flopar grave mesmo. Se a malta estava a tentar cancelar o Fantastic Beasts por o Johnny Depp não estar lá, imaginem como vão cancelar essa cena da gaja.
Your protective sweep of the 2 penthouses. Did you do anything that you would characterize as vandalism?
I did not.
Quanto tempo para o vídeo acabar, puto? Mano, coitado de Johnny Depp, puto, isto é tão chato para eles, meu. A Janizal vai entrar no Aquaman 2? A sério? Uau! Como é que é, Malhas? Olha, grande cena, puto. Eu não vou ver na mesma, mas grande cena. Parabéns para ela. Péssima escolha de filme para entrar a primeira vez, mas...
Yes, it was.
Pá, olha, grande cena.
And what did you determine?
I determined there was no crime.
Pimba.
What did you determine with respect to an assessment of probable cause?
There was no probable cause of any sort of crime.
Thank you.
Bro, se ela diz que não... Ok, faltam quantos minutos? Ainda faltam alguns, puto. Isso, Velocidade Furiosa 10. Eu gosto muito da Daniela Melchior, mas pá, Velocidade Furiosa 10 não vou ver, nem vi o 9, quanto mais o 10. Puto, Velocidade Furiosa devia ter acabado no 7. Ponto final. Já é disparatado. Já chega. Parem de fazer filmes desses. Tipo, eu ouvi dizer que o 10 agora vai ter o Sonic e vai ser passado em Júpiter. Vai ser o Sonic contra o Dominic Toretto. Ele num muscle car e o Sonic a correr ao lado. Por isso é que se chama Fast and Furious X. Vai ser o meio-irmão perdido do Don.
During the entire time you were at the penthouse on May 21st, 2016, were you wearing any body-worn video cameras?
I was not.
Are you certain?
Já vi o Sonic 2, sim. Curti bué.
I am certain.
And how is it that you are certain of that?
Because I didn't start using body-worn video until June of 2016.
Bro, ela fez essa pergunta há bocado. Ainda não vi Moon Knight, não. O último de reis.
And that's after the date of the incident, correct?
Correct.
Alex, if you wouldn't mind putting Exhibit 9 back up.
Pá, olha, já que não está a acontecer nada de jeito, deixem-me só mostrar-vos este vídeo de uma lula.
浅瀬で漂うこちらの赤い生物。深海に生息すると言われるダイオウイカです。時折ヒレを動かすなど生きているのがわかります。昨日、福井県小浜市内の海岸で見つかったこのダイオウイカ。
Pronto, achei que precisavam de ver isto. Vamos fechar.
Yes, I do recall.
Do you also see that there's a suspect column in the middle?
Yes.
Agradecido.
And is there any difference between a victim column and a suspect column with respect to the box terms?
Por acaso não estava a ver nada, tinha só este vídeo da Lula aqui parado, à espera para pô-lo em live. Desculpem.
Did you fill out one of these forms in connection with your investigation on May 21st, 2016?
I did not.
Why not?
Because it was determined there was no crime.
And Officer Sines, just one more question with respect to that Exhibit 9. I know it's not up, but the fact that you did not
VLC,
fill out
yeah.
that form,
Desculpem.
is that consistent with your training?
Yes, it is. I wouldn't fill that out because there was no crime. It's not called for.
When you testified,
Bem, enquanto não está a acontecer nada de jeito, já visitaram a Instant Gaming? A Instant Gaming é um website onde podem comprar todas as chaves com um desconto absurdo. A Instant Gaming é extremamente segura, tem os jogos ao melhor preço e vocês podem dar um browsinho no jogo, aqui no site, para procurar os jogos que vocês querem comprar. Tem jogos para todas as plataformas, PlayStation, Xbox, Nintendo e PC. Sim senhor, podem comprar. Carreguem aí nesse link que eu vou pôr agora aí, no chat. Obrigado, agradeço.
reason to not give accurate and truthful testimony.
Do not.
Officer Sines, do you see these two pictures?
Yes, I do.
Do you recognize the person in the pictures?
Yes, Amber Heard?
In both pictures?
Yes.
Yeah, do you see a difference in these two pictures?
Desculpa.
Between these two pictures?
Yes, I do the lighting of the photos.
Okay. Do you see any difference in connection with
Já agora, quero aproveitar este momento também para vos mostrar o site da PC Componentes. Está a decorrer uma campanha do Dia da Mãe, de 18 de Abril a 1 de Maio, com até 25% de desconto, ok? Portanto, vocês podem adquirir vários gadgets para a vossa mãe. É extremamente importante esta campanha. Caso tenha uma mãe que gosta de apostar em produtos tecnológicos, será um bom site para vocês visitarem e comprarem produtos tecnológicos, ok? Portanto, acedam a PC Componentes, pccomponentes.pt, e pesquisem neste largo catálogo de produtos.
is identical except for the differences that you indicated?
Yes.
Okay.
O link da PC Componentes. Espera lá, que o PC Componentes, acho que é assim. Acho que é assim, não é? Não, não é. Pronto, alguém comenta aí o link da PC Componentes, só favor.
Yes, the photo on the left is brighter, causing the redness on the cheeks to what appears to be brighter or exaggerated.
What does it say with respect to?
Já agora. Foda-se. Alguém quer ver chips? Alguém quer ver chips? Por acaso estão cá dentro. Alguém quer ver chips? Para, não consigo.
Malta, já passaram 2 horas do jantar. Está a dar aquela fome. Sabem o que podem comer? Chips AHY.
Obrigado, Lucas, obrigado.
Timestamp is 9:25:12 p.m.
Pai, sabem que podem ganhar uma bolsa espetacular na Chips Ahoy? É só participar, tá? O código está nas embalagens de Chips Ahoy, só têm que comprar Chips Ahoy e colocarem o código no site e habilitam-se a ganhar uma bolsa para apostar a vossa carreira de streaming. Ok? Portanto, é fixe.
May 21st, 2016, 9:25:12 p.m.
So both exhibits, both pictures have the same exact timestamp, correct?
Correct.
And even though that's the case, do you still believe that there's a difference between the two pictures as you previously described?
Yes, I do.
For signs, do you see exhibit 41?
Yes.
Do you recall counsel asking you questions
Yes.
Podia.
during your protective sweep of the two penthouses on May 21st, 2016? Did you see anything in disarray?
No.
Oh mano, foda-se, o que é que estamos a ver, puto? Isto é uma seca do caralho. Faltam 5 minutos. Eu quero ouvir alguma coisa em condições, bro. Já são... também estamos a ver na Entertainment Tonight, bro. Não é aqui que eu queria ver isto. Era na CBS. Por acaso estamos aqui na Legal, não sei quantos. CBS. Espera, what?
Officer, signs, I think you answered this, but...
Amber Heard is a stupid bitch. This was one goal. Ganda gaspa, obrigado.
Querido e doce TJI, quero que saibas que és um querido. PS, aceita ser meu padrinho?
Sem vergonha nenhuma este gajo. Obrigado pelos 2 euros, pá. E obrigado, Lucas, também.
Were you in a rush in any way? Investigation?
No.
Were you willing to stay as long as necessary to determine if a crime had been committed?
Yes.
At any point in time during your investigation on May 21st, 2016 at the penthouses?
Bem, visto que não está a acontecer nada de especial, tomem lá uma parada militar russa.
Праздником вас! С днем Великой Победы! Ура!
Isto parte-me todo. Desculpem, mas isto parte-me todo. Merdas à parte, isto. Parte-me todos, os gajos estão bué de coordenados. É moeda estranho, puto. Pronto, já chega, malta. Também não vamos estar aqui a ver isto até ao fim, não é? Já chega. Olha, ele está-se a rir muito.
Approached it in my earlier, but based on the cross-examination, I feel like we need to go back to that. So I'm going to ask you to take a look at what is exhibit number 6. And do you recognize you and Officer Haddon in this picture?
O que é que aquele senhor está a fazer?
Okay. And what time does the timestamp on this picture say for the elevator?
It says 21:04:43.
Okay, that's 9:04:43. Would that be right PM?
Está toda a gente a apanhar uma grande seca.
I'm going to ask you to take a look at it again at 21. And so this one has what time?
Está quase, malta, acho eu.
21:19:49.
Isto achou uma grande. Foi um dia péssimo este. Para ver o tribunal. Pronto, vimos a psicóloga de manhã, né? Já foi bom.
Would you agree that it still means that you were on and off that elevator in 15 minutes?
Assuming the times are correct, yes.
Okay. You asked to look at a number of the pictures that I had shown you earlier that were taken on the night of May 21st, 2016, both before, during, and after the time that you and Officer Haddon had reported to the